Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to continue looking forward to the 23-24 fantasy draft and do the opposite of what we did in the previous two videos. Today, we're looking at the top 5 buy low candidates that could provide you with some healthy upside depending on where they're going in the draft. Now, quick disclaimer, this is an analysis project, not just my opinion, and I'm using the player ratings from the Data Draft Player Hub, which is a measure of how complete a player is in covering goals, assists, power play points, shots, hits, and blocks. If you want access to the Player Hub, it'll be coming in the couple days and weeks going ahead into late August into early September. I'm working on that right now. I'm in the process of updating everything, so please be patient with me if it's not there. Now, this is an analysis project and therefore not exactly my opinion. So what went into the criteria for this top 5 list? So we're looking for consistently hovering around their 5-year average or trending upwards over the last 4 years. Now, either one of those two would allow you to qualify for this list. We wanted a minimum rating of 65. That'll be fantasy relevant in most 12-team leagues. If you want anything further than that, there's an honorable mention at the end, and you can find a couple more players there. And then a minimum of a 5-point drop in rating from either their 5-year average or their 21-22 rating, basically showing that they fell off last year and that they have some room to regress back up to their average or up to where they were the previous season. So without any more introductions, let's get right into the top 5 list, and we'll start it off with a guy who just changed teams, and that is Ryan O'Reilly. Now, 22-23 rating, 57, basically a 58 right there. 5-year average, 67.82, a deviation of 14.5%. If you look at his hub, he stays relatively healthy 98% of his games played over the last 5 years. What you do notice here is a 2-year downward trend from a 73 to a 67 to a 57. And then the other thing that you want to take note of here, minus 24 is not great and only 5 power play points. And then if you look at his offensive metrics, even when he came over, and he didn't get a lot of regular season playing time, admittedly, but he comes over to Toronto, and his numbers didn't really jump off the page here. 0.57 points per game is relatively low. The goal production's pretty good, 87th percentile in goals per game. Shots are a tad bit low. You could ask for a little bit more than that, but he's going to get more of an opportunity now. He'll probably be number 1 center in Nashville, playing potentially with Filip Forsberg, which could increase his assists from where they are. Right now, he's 60th percentile in assists per game, and I could see that improving if he's playing with Filip Forsberg. Again, the injury risk is low. There is a 2-year downtrend, and he is getting older, so that is something to keep in the back of your mind, which is why he's number 5. He is kind of getting up there in age. He's not, that old. Obviously, guys like Pavelski's older, and he's still productive. It's just a matter of there's this trend going down, and he is below his 5-year average, so there is room for him to regress upward with more minutes and playing top power play and playing with Filip Forsberg. But this is a guy who in the past has been closer to a point per game player. There have been times where he's been, especially in face-off leagues, he's way more valuable in face-off leagues. He's one of the best in the league right now, and especially with Patrice Bergeron retiring, he could be even more valuable in face-off leagues. But this is a guy who's got some regression built in terms of the fact that he could bump right back up even if he just gets a little bit more of an opportunity. He's not a big hitter, doesn't block a lot of shots, and I wouldn't expect that to take a healthy uptick in the next upcoming season. But there is something here to get excited about. The only problem is he's going to Nashville, and Nashville, I believe, was 27th in offense last year. They're not very offensively productive, and they haven't been for a long time except for in 21-22. In that season, everybody went off. Tanner Jeannot had 24 goals. Filip Forsberg had 84 points in 60-something games. Duchesne had a good year. Johansson had a good year. For whatever reason, everybody scored in 21-22, but other than that, they're not a high-scoring team, so this is kind of a wait-and-see approach for me. If you're in a face-off league, I would definitely target him. Otherwise, I would kind of look at him off the waiver wire and see if you can pick him up. If he starts hot and he starts to get some chemistry, if he's getting you that Filip Forsberg exposure, that's what you're going to want to look for. At number 4, we have the guy who deviated the most from both his 5-year average and the 21-22 rating, and that's Matt Dumba. As I was putting this together, he was still unclaimed, didn't have a team to go to. He has since signed with Arizona, and depending on his power play usage, he could be a good buy low candidate, but I'd probably do so off the waiver wire. I don't know if I'd draft this guy because look at how far he's fallen. In 18-19, he was an 87. He was the number 4 ranked player on my rankings. 32 games played, 12 goals, 10 assists, 22 points, 12 power play points, and he was shooting at around 12.9%. In addition to that, he was also hitting and blocking shots, which he still does, but the offense has fallen off a cliff, and he's just not fantasy ownable for anything other than as a shot block specialist right now. So right now, 22-23, he was shooting at 4% compared to that 12.9% shooting percentage. I don't think injuries played a factor in that. He does have a pretty high injury risk, only playing 73% of his games over the last 5 years, but last year, he played 79 games, so there was nothing, unless he was playing through a nagging injury the entire season. I don't have that kind of information, but if that's the case, then you're going to want to, potentially just look at him off the waiver wire for the sole reason that he's deviated 50% from his 21-22 rating, from a 73 down to a 36. And then his 5-year average is a 66, and he's 44% from that. So if he just regresses halfway up to even this 73 rating right here, he'll probably be something close to fantasy relevant off the waiver wire, especially if you need hits and blocks, because he is still doing that, but the offense has dried up. Hopefully, if he can go to Arizona and get some chemistry with some of those guys, they've got some players in that organization now. Logan Cooley signed. Michelli had a good season last year. Dylan Gunther could potentially crack the lineup this year. They've added some guys. Jason Zucker comes over, so they're kind of bolstering their lineup. And if you could get access to him right now, they're on Daily Faceoff, they're listing him as first pair with J.J. Moser. So if that holds, he's going to get a lot more ice time and a lot more offensive opportunity. He's going to have access to some players, not that he didn't in Minnesota, but he's going to have access to some offensive players, and this could be just a sheer statistic play where you're looking at the fact that he can't possibly be as bad as he was last year, and he's going to regress something close to, a 66, 68 in that range. That's what you would be hoping for if you grabbed him. But again, 79 games, 14 points, no power play production, and right now Daily Faceoff is not listing him on either of the power play units, so that is going to hurt his fantasy relevance. So keep that in mind. I would look at him as a waiver wire target if you're looking at him at all. Up next is a guy that you might want to own, Teuvo Teravainen. So over the past 4 years before this past season, he was in this range, 67, 71, 66, 69, and then for whatever reason last year it just didn't work for him. He drops down to a 55. Stays relatively healthy 84% of his games over the past 5 years. He has missed a little bit of time, but that's not the reason why he fell off. The point production just wasn't there last year. 37 points in 68 games, only 12 goals, 11 power play points, and he's a deviation from his 21-22 rating is 20%. From his 5-year average is 15%. So there is a healthy amount of regression just built into owning him this year because of the fact that even if he goes anywhere near either his 21-22 rating or his 5-year average, you're going to get some value there. Just to put this into perspective, for 22-23, he had 98th percentile in power play points, 0.40 power play points per game, 92nd percentile in assists per game, 2.6 shots, 0.84 points per game. So he's down in all of those categories in 22-23. And there is reason to believe that he could get back up there. I would assume he's going to get some more power play time. Now, the only thing that concerns me about him potentially bumping back up is he's at an 8.2% shooting percentage in 22-23, but he had the same exact shooting percentage in 19-20, where he had 63 points in 68 games and 21 of those on the power play. So it's not the shooting percentage that's bringing him down. It seems to be other factors, and there's not really a statistical case to be made. It could have just been a down year for him. Maybe he didn't have chemistry with some of the players that were around him, but most of those players are still there. They bring in Michael Bunting. I don't think that will affect him in terms of his power play time. He should continue to get power play one time, and this is a team that does score. So they're obviously a very complete team. They play excellent defense. They're not one of the highest scoring teams, but they can score. They have a good goal differential in terms of their team rating. So he doesn't hit, doesn't block. So if you're in a league that has hits and blocks, maybe fade him a little bit. But if you're in a league that weights power play points a little bit more than others, this is a guy that historically has been really good. As I mentioned, 98th percentile in 21-22 for power play points. This past year, not falling off a cliff, but 78th percentile is a lot lower. So this is just one of those players. For a power play production standpoint, he could regress back up to that 0.3, 0.4 power play points per game number, and that would give you a lot of value going forward. So this is a guy I'm keeping an eye on for the later rounds of the draft. Maybe after the 6th or 7th round, you'd start thinking about Teravainen as an option, depending on what other forwards you're looking at. But a guy I'm really high on this year, Chris Kreider. So a 71 rating last year is not falling off a cliff. He's just regressed about 11 points from where he was in 21-22. That's about 14%, give or take. His average, 5-year average, is a 78. He's about 10% below that this past year. And going into the season last year, the narrative was there's no way he's going to score 50 again. And I was of that mindset as well. But I said on this channel about a year ago, he's going to regress. But even if he does regress, he's probably going to be a 35 to 40 goal scorer, which is exactly what he hit. 36 goals. The assists have never really been there for Kreider. He's a goal scorer. He shoots, he hits, and he gets some power play production. Obviously, 21-22, he had a lot of power play production. He had 52 goals in 21-22, 25 assists. So again, not hitting the assists, that hard there. 26 power play goals though, 35 power play points. And he was shooting 20%. So the shooting percentage came down to about 15% this year. But the main reason that happened is because he was getting a lot fewer tip-in goals in front. They were targeting him in 21-22, tipping pucks in, and he got a ton of those. And they just weren't, going to that option on the power play. They've got 5 guys or more, probably 8 or 9 guys that they could put on that first unit, and they were working it around. They weren't going through Kreider to get the power play points last year, but the 54 points that he put up last year is his second highest point total of his career behind 21-22. So it's not like he fell off a cliff and had a terrible year by his own standards. It's just a matter of, guys drafted him way too early last year thinking that he could even come close to 50 goals again, and he didn't. He stays relatively healthy, so that's going to be good news for you. And again, he's in this channel, 79, 81, 78, 82. That's what you can probably expect from him this year. I wouldn't expect him to be a 71, but even if he is a 71 again, that's still relevant in a 12-team league, especially because you're getting 96th percentile in goal production, 91st percentile in shots, almost 3 shots per game, and he does hit a little bit, 1.62 hits per game. So this is a guy, nothing has changed in New York. He's still going to be on the first power play unit. He's still playing with Zibanejad on the top line. They're still a very good offensive team. So narrative-wise, there's nothing here keeping me away from Chris Kreider. The only thing that I'll have to monitor is where he's going in mock drafts. If he's going above the 4th round, I probably won't take him there. If he's going later than the 4th round, that's when you start looking at a guy who's a potential 40-goal scorer, a left wing at that. There's not a lot of goal-scoring left wingers. So these are all things that are pointing in the right direction, and if you can get him after the 4th round, that's where I'd start to target him. And last but not least, we have the obvious number 1 choice for this entire project here, Jonathan Huberdeau. Now, he didn't deviate the most out of any player. That was Matt Dumba, and you'll see on the next slide that he was, by far and away the biggest deviator from his 5-year average and from 21-22. But in terms of raw production, Jonathan Huberdeau dropped about half of his production from the previous season. So in 21-22, 80 games played, 30 goals, 85 assists, 115 points. It was about 1.45 points per game, plus 35, 38 power play points, 222 shots. And then you're looking at this past year's stats, 15 goals, 40 assists. So that's less than half the amount of assists that he had the previous season. 55 points, that's also less than half of what he put up the previous season. 15 power play points, again, less than half. And then the shot totals, again, less than, about a little bit above half. Half would have been 111. So he basically just cut his entire production in half, and that's why he fell off a cliff from an 80 to a 62. Now, he stays relatively healthy, and the narrative that I had in terms of what I thought of him going to Calgary last year was that he's the kind of player that doesn't need a lot of opportunities to get points, to rack up points. I consider him kind of like Panarin, where he might have a game where you don't notice him that much. He's not the guy driving the bus, but he ends up with 2 or 3 points at the end of the night. Well, that didn't happen under Daryl Sutter. It could potentially happen with the new coach coming in. They didn't change a lot in terms of their personnel on the ice, but now he's got another year acclimated to not just the city, but the players, the environment around him. And again, the new coach coming in, I think, is going to point him in the right direction. Even if he was still playing under Daryl Sutter, I would expect some sort of a regression back up closer to this average. But with the new coach, I would expect him to go, again, somewhere in the 75 range for production. I wouldn't necessarily expect him to put up a career season. He was very comfortable in Florida. He had all signs pointing in the right direction. For 21-22, he was playing with Barkov at times. He was playing on the first power play unit and getting all these points. And they won the President's Trophy. So it was a clear best case scenario in 21-22, and then it was a clear worst case scenario last year. And the truth for this upcoming season lies somewhere in the middle. That's my opinion, but it's also the opinion of the data. So 22% deviation from his 21-22 rating, that's pretty significant. A 16% deviation from his 5-year average. Again, if he just goes back to his average, he's a pretty good player in fantasy, and he's going to be probably better than this. He's probably going to be 90+ percentile in assists per game. Power play points per game should go back up into the 90th percentile range. He's never been a big shooter. He doesn't really hit or block shots, so he's a little bit more of a specialty tool. But you know, looking at these rankings here, last year he was ranked 29th on my rankings, and left winger he was ranked number 7. And here he's 225 and position rank 51. So there's got to be some sort of regression back up towards his average. And if that's the case, if you can get him again after the 4th round, that's where I'd start to look for him. And in the past, prior to that 21-22 season, that's where I was getting Jonathan Huberdeau. I was getting him in the 4th round and laughing all the way home, because you would get a guy like this, and then ultimately you would get a ton of value from him and get a ton of points from that left winger position, which is, you know, sometimes difficult to find. But this is the number 1 player on this list. But there are a couple of honorable mentions that we'll go over. This is the rest of the results from the data project. So obviously Matt Dumba is at the top of both of these lists. On the left, you're looking at the highest percent difference from 5-year average rating to 22-23. And then this is the highest percent difference from 21-22 to 22-23. So there's a couple of names on here I wanted to touch on really quick. Anthony Mantha, I just don't believe in him at all. There was a lot of promise here. This one year he had an 81 rating. He was hitting, he was shooting, he was doing a lot of things. But you can see every year it's been kind of down, a little bit up, and then down again. There's a clear downward trend to his file. If you believe in a bounce back Anthony Mantha, you're going to find probably he'll be on the waiver wire, I would imagine, in a 12-team league. You could definitely find him late in the draft. If you believe in just the statistical regression back up towards his average, he would potentially become a 68 overall if he hits back to his 5-year average. But I just don't believe in the player, so I didn't have him on the list. For Provorov, he's had a clear downward trend, 77, 72, 66, 56. The reason you would draft him is to bank on the fact that he's going to get more playing time and have, you know, Mike Babcock coaching him, and that could potentially help him in terms of his maybe shot blocking and hitting. But his offensive production, I don't necessarily see coming back under Mike Babcock. That could change depending on power play usage, but they do have Zach Werenski there for the power play, so I don't think he'll be quarterbacking power play 1. I would imagine they'll use Werenski there. I'm going to do a separate video on players who were injured last year, like Werenski, who I would, you know, potentially like to own this upcoming season. But for Provorov, I just don't see the fantasy relevance coming back into play with the new coach because of this 4-year downward trend, and because of the fact that I don't think Mike Babcock is going to improve his offense wildly. Then you have Ryan O'Reilly we went over, and you know, this is, again, this downward trend. The only reason why I had him on the list is because he's going to be first-line center, and you're getting Philip Forsberg exposure. So, and on top of that, you're looking at a face-off, you know, type of player where if you're in a face-off league, you want to own him. The other guy that I thought about adding into this list was Blake Wheeler, because he's going into a good situation. You can clearly see this downward trend, 84, 82, 77, and then he kind of dropped about 10 points. So that's a pretty steep drop from year to year, but the reason why I would potentially want to own him is he's not going to be very highly valued in terms of the draft, and he's going to be playing in the top 9 with the Rangers, and no matter how you slice it, there are talented players for him to play with, whether he's on the second line with Panarin, whether he's on the third line with Lafreniere and Hedl, or however they mix up the lines. He's going to be playing with some good players, and there is going to be some point potential there. He's usually assist heavy, doesn't get a lot of shots. There's not a lot of fantasy relevance to his overall game, which is why he's kind of trending in the wrong direction. But if you're just looking for points, if you're looking for assists specifically, he is potentially valuable this year. And one other guy I wanted to talk about is Mackenzie Weegar. He obviously was part of that Huberdeau trade coming over with Huberdeau to the Calgary Flames. He had a 52, a 59, a 78, a 76, and then dropped off to a 66. So he could be due for an uptick, but there's no clear trend. And again, that coaching change may help him, but the number one thing that would help him was getting power play one time, which he did get in Florida at times, and he didn't really get in Calgary as far as I remember. But if you have any more information on Mackenzie Weegar or any of these players that could potentially prove me wrong, let me know in the comments below. That's going to do it for this video. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.